Welcome to Bookish Mind, Season 05, Episode 06, where we delve into Daniel Goleman's insightful book, Focus. Today we're navigating the profound question: how do we truly hear our inner voice and let it steer our life's most crucial decisions? This deep dive is really all about exploring that incredible inner rudder that guides us through life's biggest choices, sometimes, way before our logical mind even catches up. It's going to be a pretty intriguing exploration into self-awareness, some fascinating brain science, and even some surprising insights from the animal kingdom.
Yeah, and what's compelling is that understanding our inner voice isn't just like a philosophical idea or some poetic metaphor. As we'll see, it's actually deeply rooted in our physiology, our neural networks. And ultimately, this points to, well, practical insights for navigating complex choices, making better decisions, and really living a life that feels aligned with your deepest values.
It's one thing to talk about an inner rudder in theory. It sounds good. But sometimes a real-life story just brings it all home, doesn't it? Do you have an example that kind of powerfully illustrates this?
Absolutely. Let's think about this high school student from California's Central Valley. He was apparently more interested in hot rods than homework. Nearly flunked out, actually. Then, just before graduation, a life-altering car accident sort of redirected his focus.
A real turning point, then.
Exactly. And this led him to stumble upon filmmaking kind of by accident at community college. A student project he made even caught a Hollywood director's eye, and that landed him an assistant role.
Okay, so he gets to Hollywood, maybe thinking he's made it, but that first studio experience wasn't great. He called it a bitter lesson, I think.
That's right. He directed a small film, his own script, and it did surprisingly well, which was great. But then the studio stepped in and made, arbitrary cuts, changes before it was released. And that experience just cemented his belief that creative control, that was everything, paramount.
Right. And this next part, this really shows his conviction, doesn't it? When he went to make his next movie, based on another script he wrote, a big Hollywood studio offered him a pretty standard deal. They'd finance it, sure, but they'd keep the power to change the film, final cut. And he just refused. He chose his artistic integrity over, well, potentially everything else.
He did. He basically bought creative control. He poured every single penny of his first film's profits into this really ambitious second project. And it was an immense financial struggle. He ran out of money. Banks turned him down one after another.
Wow.
Yeah, it was only a last-minute loan from the 10th bank he approached that saved him. And that film, you might guess, was Star Wars.
Star Wars. What an incredible gamble, honestly. George Lucas's insistence on that creative control, despite the huge financial risk, it just speaks volumes about his integrity, right, and his confidence in his own guiding values. It wasn't about the money initially. I mean, back then, ancillary rights, things like movie posters, T-shirts, they were pretty trivial revenue. People actually warned him against it.
Yeah.
It really highlights the strength of having that inner compass.
Which brings us right to the core question. What allows people to have such a strong inner compass, or a North Star, you could say, something that steers them according to their deepest values? The key, Goleman argues, lies in self-awareness. Particularly how accurately we decode those internal cues, the subtle murmurs from our body. These physiological reactions, they reflect the sum total of our experience relevant to whatever decision we're facing.
Okay, so biologically.
Yeah.
What's actually happening there? How does that work?
Yeah. Well, our decision rules, the things we learn from all our life experiences, they actually reside in subcortical neural networks. These are ancient parts of the brain, really, that gather, store, and apply algorithms, if you like, from everything that happens to us. Think of them as forming our inner rudder. And what's fascinating is that these regions, they're not very well connected to the verbal parts of our neocortex, our logical language brain, but they are richly connected to our gut. So we often know our values by first getting a visceral sense right, what feels wrong. Then we try to articulate those feelings.
So that old saying, trust your gut?
Yeah.
It's actually rooted in neuroscience,
Right.
not just folk wisdom.
Pretty much, yeah.
And this self-awareness, then, it's really about tuning into those subtle signals, getting better at listening.
Exactly. Self-awareness is an essential focus. It's an attunement to those subtle murmurs within that guide our way. And they help manage what we do and, just as importantly, what we don't do. This internal control mechanism, Goleman suggests, makes all the difference between a life well lived and, well, one that falters. It helps us navigate complex choices with more certainty.
Now, you mentioned animals earlier. It seems like a surprising angle, but they actually help us understand self-awareness in a really profound way. There's this standard scientific test, right? It sounds simple. Put a mark on an animal's face, show them a mirror, and see if they realize the mark is on them.
Right, simple in concept. But testing elephants, That required building this incredibly robust, elephant-proof mirror. We're talking an 8-foot by 8-foot acrylic surface, glued to plywood, steel framing, the whole thing bolted to a concrete wall. Quite the engineering feat.
Wow, basically an elephant-proof, Fort Knox-level mirror. And that's what researchers did at the Bronx Zoo with Happy, a 34-year-old Asian elephant. They let the elephants get used to these mirrors for days first. Then they put a big white X on one elephant's head. Now, Happy's companions, Maxine and Patty, they kind of ignored their marks, saw them maybe as just dirt or something. But Happy, she went right up to the mirror, looked for about 10 seconds, and then repeatedly felt around the X with the sensitive tip of her trunk. Clear self-awareness.
And the remarkable thing is just how exclusive this ability is. Only a really select few animal species pass this mirror test. We're talking some apes, chimps, dolphins, and elephants. That's pretty much it. And these species, interestingly, share a special class of neurons, sometimes considered crucial for this kind of self-awareness. They're called Konstantin von Economo neurons, or VENs for short.
VENs. Okay. And these neurons are different somehow.
They are. These unique neurons are much larger, like double the size of most brain cells. They have fewer but much longer branches. This lets them send signals faster and farther across the brain. Think of them as neural express lanes.
So why do these VNs matter for us, for humans? What's their significance?
Well, their size and shape give them that unique advantage, that speed and reach. And they're mainly found in areas connecting the executive brain, our planning, decision-making part, to our emotional centers. So they're positioned perfectly to act as a kind of personal radar. These are the areas that light up when we see our own reflection in a mirror, for example. They form a fundamental part of the brain's circuitry for our sense of self at really every level. This is me, how I feel right now, even our broader personal identity over time.
That's fascinating. To bring this back firmly to the human experience, let's think about Steve Jobs for a moment. After his liver cancer diagnosis, he gave this really heartfelt talk, didn't he, to a graduating class at Stanford. And his advice was profound. He said, "Don't let the voice of others' opinions drown out your inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become."
A powerful quote. And the immediate question that follows is how? How do you actually hear your inner voice or listen to what your heart and intuition somehow already know? The answer, according to the science Goleman presents, lies in depending on your body's signals. Think about the somatosensory cortex. That's the part of our brain that maps every sensation from our skin. It creates this kind of internal body map, but it's distorted, right? Areas with more nerve endings, like our lips or fingertips, they get huge representation. It's crucial data input for our inner knowing.
Okay, so that's the outside. And there's a similar system for the inside.
Exactly. There's a part of the brain called the insula. It's kind of tucked away behind the frontal lobes. And the insula does similar monitoring, but for our internal organs. It maps our body's insides through circuitry that links directly to our gut, our heart, liver, lungs, genitals. I mean, truly, every organ has its specific spot mapped in the insula. It also acts as a control center for those organ functions, sending signals, say, to the heart to slow its beat or the lungs to take a deeper breath.
So it's monitoring and controlling.
Right. And what's really compelling here for self-awareness is that when you turn your attention inward, focusing on any part of your body, it actually amps up the insula's sensitivity to that specific area. So if you tune into your heartbeat, for instance, the insula activates more neurons in that particular heartbeat circuitry. In fact, how well people can sense their own heartbeat has become a kind of standard measure for self-awareness in research. Yeah. The better people are at this simple task, the bigger their insula tends to be, physically. And this isn't just some biological quirk. It suggests a direct pathway to strengthening your self-awareness. Simple practices like doing a body scan meditation or just focusing on your breath can literally train your insula over time, making your intuition sharper.
So this insula connection isn't just about monitoring organs. It's fundamental to our very sense of how we're feeling emotionally.
Absolutely. People who seem oblivious to their own emotions, and often, maybe not surprisingly, to how other people feel, they tend to show sluggish insula activity. That's compared with the high activation you find in people who are really highly attuned to their inner emotional life. And at the extreme end of being tuned out, you have conditions like alexithymia, where people genuinely don't know what they feel and often struggle to even imagine what someone else might be feeling. So ultimately, this points directly to our gut feelings. We can think of them as messages from the insula and these other bottom-up circuits. They simplify life decisions for us by kind of guiding our attention toward the smarter options, the ones that feel right.
Yeah.
And the better we get at reading these subtle messages, the better our intuition becomes.
You know that subtle tug you sometimes feel, like when you suspect you're forgetting something important, maybe just as you're leaving for a big trip. I heard this story from a marathon runner. She was on her way to a race, like 400 miles away, and she felt that nagging tug, but she ignored it at first, kept driving. But as she went down the freeway,
Yeah.
it just kept coming back, this feeling. Then it hit her. She'd forgotten her running shoes.
Oh, no.
Yeah, a total disaster averted by a last-minute stop at a mall that was just about to close. She got shoes, but they were a different brand than she normally wore. And she told me, I have never been more sore after a race. It's a very visceral lesson.
That's a perfect example. And it brings us to a term from the neuroscientist Antonio Damasio, somatic marker. Somatic markers are exactly those kinds of sensations in our body, those feelings that tell us when a choice feels wrong or maybe right. This bottom-up circuitry, as Goleman describes it, telegraphs its conclusions through our gut feelings, often long before our more rational top-down circuits arrive at a reasoned conclusion. It's quite remarkable how our body gives us these clear signals if we listen.
And there's a specific brain area key to this.
Yes, a key part of this circuitry is the ventromedial prefrontal area. This region seems particularly important in guiding our decision-making when we face life's really complex choices, like who to marry or whether to buy a house. These kinds of choices, they often can't be made just by cold, rational analysis, right? There are too many variables, too much uncertainty. Instead, we do better to sort of simulate internally what it would feel like to choose option A versus option B.
Yeah.
And this brain area, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, seems to operate as that inner rudder, integrating those feelings into the decision.
Okay, so integrating feelings is key.
Definitely. And bringing this back to the bigger picture of self-awareness, Goleman talks about two major streams. There's the me, which is kind of our narrative self. It builds stories about our past and our future, linking experiences together across time, our identity. And then there's the I. The I is different. It brings us right into the immediate present moment. The I is our most intimate sense of self, existing only in the raw experience of right now. It reflects the sum of our sensory impressions, especially our body states. And the I, it builds from the brain system for mapping the body, particularly via the insula we just talked about.
So putting it all together, what does this really mean for us day to day? These internal signals, these somatic markers, these gut feelings, they're basically our inner guides, helping us at so many levels, from the huge decisions like living a life that's genuinely aligned with our values, all the way down to, well, remembering our running shoe.
Precise.
And maybe to wrap up this whole fascinating dive, there's one more example that really resonates. It's about a veteran performer at Cirque du Soleil. She was talking about their incredibly demanding routines, how performers strive for what she called perfect practice, where everything, physical motion, biomechanics, timing, angles, speed, it all just comes together flawlessly. You're never perfect all the time, but the goal is to get more perfect more of the time.
Right, striving for that peak state. So the natural follow-up question is, how do these incredibly precise performers actually know when they're nearing that elusive perfection? How do they sense it? And her insight was so powerful. She said, it's the feeling. You know it in your joints before you know it in your head, which just beautifully echoes this deep connection we've been exploring between our body, our feelings, and our ability to make these really insightful decisions and adjustments.
It really does. So whether we're talking about George Lucas and his unwavering artistic integrity, or an elephant showing surprising self-recognition in a mirror, or just the undeniable power of our own gut feelings, or even the incredible felt precision of a Cirque du Soleil routine, it seems so clear that our bodies hold this profound wisdom. And it's not just abstract philosophy, it's literally wired into us.
Exactly. That inner rudder isn't some mystical force field. It's a highly sophisticated biological system. It integrates our deepest values, all our accumulated experiences, and these subtle physiological cues from our body. So the key takeaway really is about cultivating that self-awareness, about truly learning to attune ourselves to these subtle internal signals. They are there, guiding us if only we learn how to listen.
Which leads to a final thought for you, our listener, knowing that your body often knows things long before your conscious mind catches up. What subtle signals might you have been ignoring lately? And how might actually listening to them change your next crucial decision?